Imagine holding in your hand a simple 5-cent piece minted in 1974, a coin that millions of people passed through their daily lives never realizing the fascinating history, the artistry, the economic background, and the small but meaningful changes that made this Jefferson nickel not just money, but a part of American culture and heritage. Welcome to the story of the 1974 Jefferson nickel, a coin that continues the proud legacy of American numismatics and reflects the journey of a nation through its economy, politics, and artistry. To understand the Jefferson nickel of 1974, we must first step back and remember why the Jefferson nickel series was introduced in the first place. In 1938, the United States Mint replaced the Buffalo nickel with a new design honoring Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States, and one of the most influential figures in American history. The decision came after a design competition in which Felix Schlag, a German-born American sculptor, submitted. The winning entry, Schlag's design, featured a left-facing portrait of Jefferson on the obverse and Monticello, his Virginia estate, on the reverse, and this design would endure with minor modifications for decades. By the time we reach 1974, the Jefferson nickel had been in circulation for 36 years, and the coin continued to be an essential part of daily commerce. It was struck at 3 different mints: the Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint. The Philadelphia and Denver facilities produced the regular circulation strikes, while San Francisco issued proof coins for collectors. The 1974 nickel had a mintage running into the hundreds of millions, making it widely available across the country. But even within this enormous production, there are subtleties, differences, and interesting details that make the coin worthy of a deeper look. The obverse design of the 1974 nickel continues to display the portrait of Jefferson. Though over the decades, the detail of Schlag's original artistry had worn down through repeated dye use and slight modifications, Jefferson's features appear bold yet softened compared to earlier strikes. The inscriptions include, "In God, we trust," to the left of the portrait, "Liberty," with the date 1974 to the right, and the mint mark, if present, just to the right of Jefferson's ponytail. The placement of the mint mark in 1974 is a notable detail, because beginning in 1968, the mint mark was moved to the obverse side beneath. The date before that, it had traditionally appeared on the reverse. The reverse of the 1974 nickel still depicts Monticello Jefferson's iconic home in Charlottesville, Virginia. The design shows the neoclassical architecture with its columned front, and central dome beneath the building is the word Monticello, followed by the denomination 5 cents, and the country name United States of America. Above the image is the motto E pluribus unum. The design, though simple, carries a stately appearance and has remained a recognizable symbol of American coinage for generations. From a technical perspective, the 1974 Jefferson nickel was struck in a composition of 75% copper and 25% nickel. This metallic makeup had been used since the end of World War II, when the special wartime alloy of silver, manganese, and copper was discontinued. The return to the copper-nickel blend made the coin durable with a silver-like appearance that has allowed nickels to stand the test of time in circulation. The weight of the coin remained at 5 grams with a diameter of 21.2 millimeters and a plain edge, all of which has been consistent throughout most of the Jefferson nickel series. In terms of mintages, the 1974 Philadelphia nickel saw a production of hundreds of millions, while the Denver Mint also struck large numbers, making the coin widely accessible. The San Francisco Mint created proof coins of the highest quality using specially prepared dies and planchets to produce mirror-like fields and frosted devices. These proof coins were intended for collectors and not for general circulation, making them desirable pieces today. The 1970s were an important period for American coinage, and the 1974 nickel must be seen within this context. The country was experiencing economic challenges, inflationary pressures, and changes in daily life. The use of coinage remained central to commerce, vending machines, transit fares, and countless small transactions. The nickel especially played a vital role since it bridged the gap between the penny and higher denominations in daily trade. From a collector's perspective, the 1974 Jefferson nickel might appear common at first glance because of its large mintages, however. Condition rarity plays a huge role. Coins that survive in uncirculated grades, particularly those with sharp strikes and attractive luster, are always of interest-proof versions, especially deep cameo examples from San Francisco are considered premium by collectors. Another fascinating aspect lies in error coins of 1974. As with any large-scale production, mint errors such as off-center strikes, double strikes, die cracks, or planche flaws exist, and these mistakes can transform a common nickel into a rare collectible commanding much higher value in the numismatic marketplace. The grading of Jefferson nickels, including the 1974 issue, is an area of study in itself. Professional grading companies evaluate strike, sharpness, luster surface, preservation, and overall eye appeal. The highest levels of mint state condition can drastically increase the desirability of a coin. For example, a 1974 nickel graded at MS66 or higher may be far scarcer than its huge mintage suggests, due to the difficulty of preserving coins free of contact marks and wear. When examining proof nickels of 1974, collectors pay close attention to cameo and deep cameo contrasts, where the frosted portrait and Monticello stand out sharply. Against the reflective mirror-like fields, the development of this proof quality was a hallmark of San Francisco production in the 1970s, and a deep cameo example from 1974 is highly sought after today. Beyond the numismatic factors, the 1974 nickel is a window into American life. At the time, it was the age of post-Vietnam society. The Watergate scandal was shaking. The political system, inflation was impacting the economy, and the American people were dealing with rapid cultural change. Yet through all this, the Jefferson nickel remained a constant symbol of stability in everyday commerce. To put the 1974 nickel into perspective, within the larger series, it represents a continuation of the long-standing Schlag design, which would remain in place until 2004. When the Westward Journey nickel series introduced new designs marking the bicentennial of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Thus, the 1974 issue falls within what many collectors call the classic era of Jefferson nickels, an era defined by traditional imagery and widespread use. For the advanced collector varieties of 1974, nickels can offer further intrigue. Die varieties, including repunched mint marks, doubled dies, and other small details are studied carefully by specialists. Some varieties may only be known to a few experts, but they highlight the complexity and craftsmanship involved in minting millions of coins every year. The Jefferson nickel series has long been a favorite for beginning collectors because the coins are affordable, widely available, and historically rich. A complete date and mint mark collection of Jefferson nickels provides a journey through American history from the late 1930s to the modern day, and the 1974 nickel holds its rightful place within. This narrative, while perhaps not rare in absolute numbers, it becomes significant as part of the long continuum of American coinage. As we reflect on the 1974 nickel, we realize that every coin has two stories. One is the technical story of its creation, the dies, the mints, the alloys, the mintages, the grades, and the varieties. The other is the human story of the time period, the hands it passed through, the economic backdrop, the historical events shaping the nation together. These stories make the Jefferson nickel not just a 5-cent piece, but a living artifact of American life. So when you hold a 1974 Jefferson nickel, remember that it is more than spare change. It is a link to Thomas Jefferson, to Felix Schlag, to the mints that produced it, and to the millions of Americans who used it in their daily lives. It is a coin that may seem ordinary, but carries with it extraordinary meaning in the world of numismatics and history, and that is the power of a simple nickel. Imagine holding in your hand a coin that represents not only a small piece of American currency, but also a window into the history of the United States. During one of its most turbulent decades, the Jefferson nickel minted in 1968 is more than just a 5-cent piece. It is a reflection of American culture, politics, economics, and artistry from the time of its creation to the modern era. And when we talk about the 1968 Jefferson nickel, we step into a fascinating story that ties together the legacy of Thomas Jefferson, the craftsmanship of Felix Schlag, who designed the coin in the late 1930s, and the broader events of the late 1960s that shaped America in ways that are still felt today. The year 1968 was a year of transformation and turmoil in the United States. The country was dealing with the aftermath of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy. The Vietnam War was raging. Protests were erupting across college campuses, and American society was grappling with questions of civil rights, democracy, and its place in the world. In this charged atmosphere, the Mint continued its responsibility of producing coinage for everyday commerce, and among the most familiar pieces struck during that year was the Jefferson nickel, first introduced in 1938 as a replacement for the Buffalo nickel. The Jefferson nickel was designed by German-born sculptor Felix Schlag, who won a national competition to design the coin in 1938. The obverse features a left-facing portrait of Thomas Jefferson, the third President of the United States, author of the Declaration of Independence, and a central figure in American democracy. The reverse features his famous Virginia estate Monticello, which Jefferson himself designed and which stands as a symbol of his intellect and his contradictions, as both an advocate for liberty and a man who owned enslaved people by 1968. Schlag's design had been circulating for 3 decades, and the coin had become a trusted staple in American pockets, purses, and cash registers. Now, what makes the 1968 Jefferson nickel particularly interesting is not just the design itself, but the context of minting in that specific year. Prior to 1968, all proof coins had been struck. In Philadelphia, however, beginning in 1968, proof production was moved permanently to the San Francisco Mint. This marked a turning point in the history of American coinage. The 1968 proof Jefferson nickels struck at San Francisco with the S Mint mark became the very first modern proof coins to carry that designation. Collectors instantly recognized these pieces as significant because they marked the revival of proof coinage after a 3-year hiatus between 1965 and 1967. During that suspension, proof and uncirculated mint sets were replaced with so-called special mint sets, which did not achieve the same level of mirror-like finish and sharp detail that collectors loved. The return of proof coins in 1968, with the Jefferson nickel leading the way, restored a sense of artistry and tradition to American numismatics. The circulation strikes of the 1968 nickel also have a story of their own. The coins were minted at 3 facilities: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Unlike Philadelphia nickels of earlier years, which carried no mint mark, the 1968 issues introduced a permanent change. All mint marks now appeared on the obverse of the coin, just below Jefferson's portrait on the right side near the rim. This was a significant modification, because for decades the placement of mint marks had been a subject of debate, and in 1965 the Mint had even removed mint marks entirely to discourage coin hoarding during a nationwide shortage. When the mint marks returned in 1968, their new position on the obverse signaled both a design shift and a renewed sense of transparency for collectors and the general public. In terms of mintage, the 1968 nickels struck at Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco circulated widely and were used in everyday commerce across the country. These were not rare in general circulation, but certain varieties and conditions became valuable over time. For example, proof strikes from San Francisco that were particularly well preserved or featured deep cameo contrasts between frosted devices and mirrored fields grew in demand among collectors. Similarly, circulation strikes with full steps on the Monticello reverse, a grading designation that refers to sharp and complete detail in the depiction of the steps became especially sought after since most coins did not strike with that level of clarity due to the mint's high-speed production. Understanding the historical role of the 1968 nickel also requires a look at how coinage fit into the broader economic situation of the late 1960s. Inflation was beginning to take hold, and the United States was still adjusting to the removal of silver from its coinage earlier in the decade, while nickels never contained silver except for the wartime alloy years. Between 1942 and 1945, when nickel was needed for the war effort, the public had grown accustomed to seeing design and compositional changes across coin denominations. The Jefferson nickel stood as one of the few coins whose design and metallic composition remained unchanged during this time. Its stability provided a kind of continuity amidst economic uncertainty. Collectors often point out that the 1968 Jefferson nickel is a coin of transitions. It represents the transition from Philadelphia to San Francisco. For proof strikes the transition of mint mark placement to the obverse, the transition back to proof production after the special mint set years, and the broader transition of America itself through a decade of upheaval and change. While a single 5-cent piece may seem insignificant, it reflects the story of a nation striving to balance tradition with change and stability with innovation. To truly appreciate the 1968 Jefferson nickel, you have to think about the layers of meaning it carries at the surface. It is simply a common coin struck in the millions and used in daily transactions at gas stations, diners, and grocery stores. But for numismatists, it is an artifact of design, history, monetary policy, and cultural symbolism. The details of its production, the choices made by the mint, and the reception by collectors all combine to give this coin a depth that extends far beyond its face value. By the time you finish studying the history of the 1968 Jefferson nickel, you realize that no coin exists in isolation. Every detail, from the placement of a mint mark to the shine of a proof finish, tells a story about the people who made it, the time in which it was struck, and the values that shaped the nation. And that is why, when you hold a 1968 nickel in your hand, you are not just holding a piece of metal, you are holding a chapter in American history. Imagine holding in your hand a coin that has traveled through decades of history. A coin that at first glance may seem like just another piece of change, yet within its copper-nickel surface lies a story that connects artistry, economics, politics, and the lives of millions of Americans today. We journey deep into the story of the 1991 Jefferson nickel, a coin that carries the legacy of one of the most enduring series in United States coinage history, and one that remains an essential piece of the American pocket. To understand the 1991 Jefferson nickel, we first need to place it within its historical framework. The Jefferson nickel series began in 1938, replacing the Buffalo nickel, which had run its course after 25 years. The new design was the result of a public competition won by Felix Schlag, a German-born sculptor who envisioned a bold image of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and Monticello Jefferson's Virginia estate on the reverse. This design endured largely unchanged. For decades becoming a staple of American coinage, by 1991, the Jefferson nickel had already been circulating for more than half a century, making it one of the longest-running designs in U.S. history, and by that point, it was deeply woven into the fabric of American life. The year 1991 itself was significant in many ways. In the United States, it was a time of transition. The Cold War was coming to an end, and the nation was beginning to shape its place in a rapidly changing world. The Gulf War had erupted in January and was concluded by the end of February, influencing public morale and national priorities at home. The economy was experiencing challenges with a recession that began in 1990 and stretched into 1991, and during this time, the U.S. Mint continued its vital role, producing coins that kept commerce moving, including the Jefferson nickel. When we look specifically at the 1991 nickel, Its composition remained the same as it had been since 1946, a copper-nickel alloy consisting of 75% copper and 25% nickel. This alloy gave the coin its familiar silvery appearance and durability. The weight was 5 grams, and the diameter 21, 2 millimeters with a plain edge. It was struck at 3 mints, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Each mint produced coins for different purposes. The Philadelphia and Denver mints created circulation strikes, while San Francisco struck proof. Coins intended for collectors. The mint marks P, D, and S distinguished these issues and are an important detail for numismatists. The mintage numbers for 1991 were substantial, as the Jefferson nickel was a heavily used denomination. Philadelphia struck over 570 million nickels. Denver produced over 542 million, while San Francisco delivered around 2.8 million proofs. These numbers show the sheer scale of coinage production in the early 90s, ensuring that nickels were widely available for circulation and commerce across the country. Yet among these massive mintages, collectors today seek out coins in pristine, uncirculated condition or proofs with perfect cameo contrast, as those carry higher value design. Wise, the 1991 nickel continued to feature Schlag's original work, though some modifications had been made over the decades. Jefferson's portrait on the obverse presented a left-facing profile with inscriptions reading, "In God We Trust Liberty," and the year 1991. On the reverse, Monticello appeared in classic neoclassical style with inscriptions, "Monticello e pluribus unum, United States of America," and 5 cents, though simple. The design carried elegance and continuity, serving as a reminder of Jefferson's influence on American ideals and architecture collectors. Examining the 1991 Jefferson nickel, also note certain varieties and errors that can make individual coins stand out. Among them are coins with strong strikes and fully detailed steps on Monticello, often called full steps, which are rare and prized examples. There are also occasional minting errors such as off-center strikes, die cracks, and double dies, which spark excitement in the collecting community. These varieties transform ordinary coins into sought-after treasures and add layers of depth to the history of the 1991 nickel. The cultural context of the early 90s adds further dimension to this coin, while the nation was navigating post-Cold War optimism and economic uncertainty. Everyday Americans relied on the nickel for purchases, from vending machines to transit fares the coin passed. From hand to hand, often unnoticed, yet it symbolized continuity in a world undergoing dramatic change. Numismatically, the 1991 nickel stands as a bridge between the mid-century Jefferson nickels of the past and the redesigned versions that would emerge in the early 2000s. For collectors today, the 1991 Jefferson nickel is widely accessible, but it also represents an opportunity to study how coins connect to broader historical and economic shifts. It encourages exploration into mintage numbers, die varieties, proof quality, and the long arc of Jefferson nickel production that by 1991 had already spanned more than 50 years and would continue into the 21st century for students of numismatics. It offers lessons not only in design and production, but in the way a small object can encapsulate the spirit of its time. As we reflect on the story of the 1991 Jefferson nickel, we see more than just a piece of currency. We see the enduring power of design, the resilience of American coinage systems, and the ways in which coins act as silent witnesses to history. This particular year, like all others in the Jefferson nickel series, carries its own meaning shaped by the mint that produced it, the collectors who preserve it, and the countless hands that exchanged it in daily commerce. And in telling its story, we uncover a deeper appreciation for a humble 5-cent piece that continues to hold a place in the American experience. Imagine holding in your hand a small 5-cent piece dated 1997, a coin that at first glance seems ordinary, a coin that millions of Americans spent in gas stations, grocery stores, diners, and vending machines, a coin that passed quietly from pocket to pocket, yet behind this seemingly simple Jefferson nickel lies a layered history filled with artistry, minting, precision, economic significance, and the evolution of American coinage itself. To capture the story of the 1997 Jefferson nickel, we must travel back not only to the minting presses of that year, but also to the origins of the Jefferson series itself, which began in 1938 when the United States Mint sought to replace the Buffalo nickel with a new design honoring Thomas Jefferson and his beloved Monticello. The winning design, created by Felix Schlag, introduced the profile of Jefferson on the obverse and the stately image of Monticello on the reverse, a design that would remain a cornerstone of American numismatics for decades. By 1997, the Jefferson nickel had already been in circulation for nearly 60 years, making it one of the longest-running coin series in United States history. The year 1997 falls at an interesting point in the Jefferson nickel timeline because it was just before the major design overhauls of the early 2000s that would change the appearance of the coin for the first time in generations. The 1997 nickel represents the tail end of the classic era of Schlag's original vision, and collectors view it as part of the last wave before dramatic changes arrived. Minting in 1997 took place at 3 United States Mint facilities, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, each of which contributed to the production of the coin. Philadelphia nickels carry no mint mark, Denver nickels bear the D mint mark, and San Francisco struck proof coins with the S mark using specially prepared dies and polished planchets for collectors, while circulation strikes from Philadelphia and Denver were produced. By the hundreds of millions, the proof strikes from San Francisco were limited to far smaller quantities, giving them a higher appeal among collectors seeking pristine examples of the coin. The composition of the 1997 nickel remained the same as it had been since 1946, consisting of 75% copper and 25% nickel, creating the familiar silver-gray color that has defined the coin for decades. The weight was 5 grams, the diameter 21.2 millimeters, and the edge plane with no reading. These specifications had become a hallmark of consistency and reliability, and the very uniformity of the coin contributed to its widespread trust as a medium of everyday exchange. In the broader economic setting of 1997, the United States was experiencing a period of growth and technological change. The late 90s were defined by the rise of the internet, globalization, and expanding consumer markets, and through all of this, the nickel remained a humble but essential tool of commerce. The coin passed through cash registers in bustling shopping malls, arcade machines in family entertainment centers, and toll booths along highways connecting an increasingly mobile nation. Each 1997 nickel became not just a piece of metal, but a witness to the American experience of its time. Collectors often look back at 1997 nickels as common coins in terms of mintage numbers, but rarity can still be found in specific conditions. Full steps nickels, which display a sharp and complete strike on the steps of Monticello, are particularly prized because achieving this level of detail required perfectly prepared dies and careful striking. Such coins can fetch much higher values in the numismatic market compared to their worn, everyday counterparts. Proof coins from San Francisco also stand out with their mirror-like fields and frosted devices, representing the finest craftsmanship of the mint in that year. The artistry of Felix Schlag's design continued to carry meaning. In 1997, Jefferson's portrait served as a reminder of American leadership during the nation's founding era, while Monticello symbolized Jefferson's architectural vision and his ties to Virginia. The decision to keep this design for so many decades reflected a cultural desire for stability in national symbols, even as other denominations underwent redesigns over time. This makes the 1997 nickel part of a larger cultural story in which tradition and continuity held deep value. We move deeper into the discussion of the 1997 Jefferson nickel, One must consider the role of coin collecting in the late 20th century. The hobby was enjoying steady participation with coin shows, local clubs, and growing interest in third-party grading services companies such as PCGS and NGC offered certified grading of coins, providing assurance of authenticity and standardized quality descriptions for collectors. A 1997 nickel-graded MS-67 or higher, particularly with full steps, designation could become a prized piece in a registry set, elevating an otherwise common date into a significant collectible. Furthermore, the 1997 nickel holds historical context when compared to other years in the Jefferson series wartime. Nickels from the 1940s used a silver alloy because of metal shortages during World War II, and earlier examples from the late 1930s carried subtle differences in design. By the time we reached 1997, the nickel had returned to its standard composition and continued the long run of Schlag's design with no major alterations. Yet collectors today see this as one of the final calm years before the 2004 westward journey. Nickels introduced radical new reverse designs commemorating the Lewis and Clark expedition and Jefferson's role in the Louisiana Purchase. To appreciate the full history of the 1997 Jefferson nickel, one must also recognize the mint's technological advancements during the era. Improvements in DI preparation, striking techniques, and quality control allowed for higher levels of consistency compared to earlier decades. While mintage is numbered in the hundreds of millions, the precision and uniformity of these coins reflect the increasing industrial capability of the mint as it prepared to enter the 21st century. By the end of the 2-hour journey into the story of the 1997 Jefferson nickel, what emerges is not just the tale of a 5-cent piece, but a window into American history, economics, technology, and culture. This coin embodies the closing years of a classic design, the continuation of a numismatic legacy, and the enduring role of small change in the life of a great nation. It reminds us that even the most common coins hold extraordinary stories waiting to be uncovered, and the 1997 Jefferson nickel stands as both a practical tool of commerce and a lasting symbol of American heritage. Imagine holding in your hand a small piece of American history, a coin that does not just carry a monetary value, but tells a story of design, politics, economy, and the people who shaped a nation. The 1956 Jefferson nickel may look like just another 5-cent piece to the untrained eye, but once you begin to explore its origins, its production, its role in mid-20th century America, and its legacy in numismatics, you realize it is far more than ordinary. It is a reflection of the United States during the post-war era, a time of prosperity, a time of Cold War tension, a time when coinage itself was a tool of national identity. The story of the Jefferson nickel begins in 1938, when the United States Mint retired the Buffalo nickel and introduced the new design honoring Thomas Jefferson and his iconic home. Monticello, the designer, was Felix Schlag, whose vision gave Americans a simple yet enduring image of one of the nation's most important founding fathers by the mid-1950s. This design had already been in circulation for nearly 2 decades, but every single year carried its own significance, influenced by changes in minting technology, shifts in metal supplies, and the broader cultural context of the United States. The year 1956 was a fascinating one for American coinage, and the Jefferson nickel is no exception. Dwight D. Eisenhower was president. The nation was in the midst of the Cold War. The interstate highway system had just begun reshaping the American landscape. Elvis Presley was rising as a cultural icon, and coins like the 1956 Jefferson nickel were quietly circulating in every pocket purse and cash register, connecting the lives of ordinary citizens to the broader economic machine of the United States. The Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint struck the 1956 nickels, each carrying its own subtle distinctions that collectors today study with intense precision. Production of the 1956 Jefferson nickel reached over 100 million pieces in Philadelphia, and more than 67 million pieces in Denver. Yet not all nickels are created equal because quality of strike, die polishing mint errors, and the preservation of luster have made some examples far more desirable to collectors today. A sharp strike with full steps on Monticello, meaning the steps are clearly defined without blending, is a key attribute that transforms an ordinary circulated coin worth only 5 cents into a high-grade treasure that may command hundreds or even thousands of dollars at auction. To fully appreciate the 1956 nickel, we must examine the details of its design. Jefferson's profile facing left remains dignified and statesmanlike. The word liberty written in a cursive hand adds a personal touch. The date, 1956, holds its place firmly on the obverse, while Monticello on the reverse reminds us of Jefferson's architectural achievement. The structure symbolizes not just a home, but the intellectual spirit of the Enlightenment that Jefferson embodied. The design, though simple, is deeply symbolic, tying together themes of leadership independence and enduring national pride. Minting technology of the 1950s also played a critical role in how the 1956 nickel appears today. This was a period before the widespread use of computer-assisted engraving, so dies were cut and maintained by skilled engravers. At the mint's polishing of dies sometimes left mirrored surfaces that numismatists classify as proof-like or brilliant. The proofs of 1956 struck at the Philadelphia Mint were made in limited quantities and are especially prized by collectors with their mirror finish and deep cameo contrast. These coins were not meant for circulation, but for collectors and dignitaries, offering a pristine example of the design. Another dimension of the 1956 Jefferson nickel story is the economic context. Post-war America was booming. Consumer goods were plentiful. The dollar was strong and coinage was abundant, yet inflationary pressures were beginning to rise slowly, and the nickel as a denomination played a crucial role in daily transactions. Vending machines, jukeboxes, bus fares, and small purchases all relied heavily on the 5-cent piece. The 1956 nickel was thus a coin of the people, touching nearly every American life on a daily basis. The cultural role of the nickel also deserves attention. During the 1950s, nickels were often associated with soda fountains, diners, and jukeboxes, placing them at the heart of youth culture. A teenager in 1956 could drop a nickel in a jukebox and hear the latest Elvis Presley hit. That very coin could later end up in a cash register at a diner in Ohio before traveling across the country in someone's pocket. This constant movement tied the Jefferson nickel to the rhythm of American life in ways that few artifacts can match. From a collector's perspective, the 1956 Jefferson nickel has multiple layers of significance. High-grade mint state examples, especially those with full steps, are exceedingly rare and command strong premiums. Proof coins from the year with deep cameo contrast are highly sought after, while error coins such as double die, strikes off center strikes, and improperly annealed planchets add further intrigue. Each error tells its own story about the challenges of coin production in that era, turning what could be considered a flaw into a collectible treasure. Beyond the physical coin, we must also consider how numismatists study and classify these coins' grading systems. Established by the American Numismatic Association and services like PCGS and NGC, allow collectors to evaluate 1956 nickels with remarkable precision. Terms like MS65 or PR67 denote levels of preservation that significantly impact market value. Thus, the 1956 nickel becomes not only a piece of money, but an object of scientific and historical study. Its condition, its strike, its luster, all factors that transform it from pocket change into an artifact of national heritage. The legacy of the 1956 Jefferson nickel is also tied to the longevity of the Jefferson series itself, as one of the longest-running coin designs in U.S. history. The Jefferson nickel remained virtually unchanged until 2004, when the Westward Journey series introduced New reverses for a short period before the return of Monticello in 2006. The 1956 issue sits squarely in the middle of that long tradition bridging the early years of Schlag's design with the modern era as we piece together the historical context. The design evolution, the production statistics, the collector market, and the cultural role of the 1956 Jefferson nickel, it becomes clear that this coin is not just a small circular piece of metal. It is a window into America in the 1950s. It reflects the prosperity, the anxieties, the culture, and the aspirations of its time. Every worn nickel that passed through the hands of millions of Americans in 1956 carried with it the silent story of Thomas Jefferson Monticello and the ideals of a nation. That was both looking back to its founding and forward to its future. If you want to truly understand America in the mid-20th century, you cannot ignore its coinage, and the 1956 Jefferson nickel stands as one of the most fascinating examples of how money is never just money. It is history, art, culture, technology, and national identity, all struck into metal and passed from hand to hand, shaping and recording the story of a nation one nickel at a time.